You're listening to the Recovered Life Show, the show that helps people in recovery live their best recovered lives. And here is your host, Damon Frank.
And welcome back to the Recovered Life Show, episode 107, Friday, May 6, 2022. What's up, Kristina Dennis?
Oh, celebrating Friday. How are you, Damon Frank?
I am doing well. We have a very special episode today, Kristina. You are celebrating. I'm just going to give it away right up front here.
Okay.
Before we go in, Kristina is celebrating 25 years of sobriety. Congratulations.
Yes, I am. I know. I got sober when I was 2 years old. Just kidding.
Yes. You were
Pretty
an
amazing.
embryo sober.
Yes.
So
yes,
you came out of the
exactly.
womb, never. Yes, exactly. Well, this is a really huge deal.
Thank you.
You know, I hesitate to say a quarter of a century because you're still very young, but that's a long time. 25 years is a long time. So we're going to dive into how she did it, her thoughts, what happened.
Yeah.
You know, Kristina, you're such a huge member of the Recovered Life community, a co-host on the show, and a recovery coach and expert that's helped a lot of people. So we're going to dive into how you did it in this special Recovered Life segment.
Thank you. But before we do that, I want to let everybody know the Recovered Life Show is brought to you by Recovered Life contributors like me and people like you. Please keep sharing, liking, following. Leave us a comment, ask us a question. Also visit info.recoveredlife.us where you can join this network for free and leave us a donation that allows us to keep doing this. Once again, that's info.recoveredlife.us. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Kristina, for mentioning all of that. Look, just that little buying us a little cup of coffee to keep us on air. It puts a smile on our face and it says, hey, you know what? We're going in the right direction, and it helps us pour more resources back into the show that helps other people. So thank you so much for mentioning that. Hey, look, I want to dive right in because, you know, we were on a Clubhouse room earlier this week on a Recovered Life discussion, and the whole topic was you and your 25 years was most
Pretty
of it.
Amazing.
And it is amazing. And, you know, you've helped so many people through Recovered Life and, you know, through your 25 years of recovery. I wanted to kind of dive in to, you know, questions that people had. And I thought it would be great to just do this segment on it. First of all, 25 years, that's a huge milestone. Like what's your thoughts on like when you woke up today and you're like, wow, I have 25 years?
Well, you know, I feel like I might have lived every day of those 25 years. And it also happened just like that. I am so incredibly grateful that I had the willingness 25 years ago to say, okay, I'm going to try a different way. I mean, it truly saved my life. But in addition to that, it gave me a life that I couldn't even conceptualize when I was still drinking. This kind of life happened for other people, not me. And so I would have to just say, I'm kind of excited, but I'm also really, really humbled by it.
Yeah, you know, I think when you look back at something like a huge experience like that, you know, a lot of times it's like, oh, this relief. It's like, oh, I've made it there, right? But at the same time, like you just said, it wasn't easy along the way. Like, I think people think that, you know, well, obviously people who have long-term sobriety and they've been doing the recovery deal, it must have just been easier, you know, for you. It must have just been easier for the people who get this long-term sobriety, but that's not the case, right?
No, I think, you know, when I was first getting sober, I thought about people, if I could even figure out what it meant, I thought they could not have had the life I have. And I will tell you that there has been, you know, post-sobriety trauma in my life. And it is amazing that people were there with me, but it's also a testament to just being willing to just be part of life, to be right-sized. I certainly have had my share of crashes, you know, in the last 25 years. It's not been easy sailing, but I knew at every turn that my life would be so much worse if I picked up. And so I did what people told me to do. I didn't drink no matter what, and I kept coming.
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the things that's interesting that you share and what I like about the Recovered Life discussions that we have. It's a different element than the show. You know, the
Yes.
show's great because it's super informative and we cover topics that honestly, you know, we wouldn't have an opportunity to discuss or people wouldn't have an opportunity to think about. But, you know, the discussions are really interesting too, because we go in depth with other people's problems that they're having. And one of
Right.
the things I've always admired about you is you've been the first to actually jump right out there and say, hey, listen, I am suffering right now, or I have
Mhm.
suffered with that, or I have been through, you've been through some very traumatic things during your sobriety, but yet you still made it through. Right. So
Yes.
your openness, I think, is one of your, is one of the huge benefits of you. Right. Like,
Oh,
and as
thank you.
obviously had to help you because, you know, you're honest that the struggle has not always been easy.
Yes, and, you know, I really realized that if I wasn't open, nobody was gonna truly know me, and that disconnection that I would have. I struggle with perfectionism. Many people who watch the show know that my son was diagnosed at 18 months of age with autism spectrum disorder, and our journey was incredibly difficult. I certainly have suffered with a lot of family dynamic. Recently, my mother passed, and we had not seen each other since I was 17 years old. Addiction is a family disease. And I can't say, I know that every time I was willing to raise my hand and say, me too, yes, this happened, I relate, I got healing, and the person that was on the other side of it was also healed. Um, there is power in vulnerability. There is power in saying, me too. There is power in joining. You know, we talk about that all the time in recovery, being part of the herd, not better than and not less than. And every time I've reached up my hand and said, I need help, there has been somebody along the way who had been through something similar to help me. And also, when I have accepted somebody's request for help and been there to help them, the recovery has been priceless.
Yeah. I have to ask you this question. It's like, and I know that I've had this experience as well, where has there been a time in the last 25 years where you were faced with this situation or woke up and you're like, oh man, I might not get through this. I might not get
Yes,
through the day sober. Right. I'd love
yes.
for you to share that with people because I think that that's important because I think so many people go through that multiple. I've been through that multiple times where
Mhm.
I've woken up and it's just like, you know, man, I just got to get through the next minute. Now I don't even
Right.
have to worry about the next day.
Right, so much. When I first started addressing codependency at a real formal level, where I was actively saying, I don't know how to manage this relationship, I don't know how to handle it. There were definitely moments where I thought, I'll just go out and get drunk and find another person to behave. But knowing that that was going to, playing the whole tape through, I knew at that time that because I had the habit of connecting with people that also were sober, I had that little break, that one little stopgap before I took that drink in, or started to plan my relapse. I will tell you that there are times when I was isolated due to my son's condition, that I felt very, very alone. And I literally counted the minutes until the next day to get to a place where I could make that phone call. It has been lonely. We talked about loneliness today in the room, and the discussion, the Recovered Life discussion. And one of the most astonishing facts that I have learned recently is that loneliness actually increases your odds of dying by 45%. It actually shrinks your life. And I will tell you that there were moments during my son's early years when he very much struggled, where I felt completely alone. But I happened to live one door next to my first sponsor in California. And just knowing that she was there helped me get through that night and many
Yeah,
nights.
having people in your life, building this community, having something to look forward too. I think it's
Yes.
great. And, and one thing I want to put out here, because I don't want to have across this negative, I bet you would even agree that a large majority of the days that you've had sober have been amazing too. It's
Yes.
not always a struggle, and I think this is the big misinterpretation with recovery is it's not attractive to people who are in active alcohol and drug addiction, because they're like, man, everybody seems so miserable. But the reality is people aren't miserable most of the time.
No, in fact, I think we're really funny, and there's a lot of humor and life and joy to be had. I mean, prior to getting sober, I had no skills on actually enjoying my life. When I got to a recovery program, I thought, put down the drink and just be miserable. Like literally, I thought that was what my life would look like. But instead, I've had the best relationships. I've been able to travel the world. I've had opportunities handed to me because of knowing somebody or being part of it. I have a lot of joy in being a parent. I have a life that I couldn't even dream of. And I wouldn't tell people the physical cravings go away. There is freedom from the phenomena of obsession often, more. I mean, you said days, I would say even months that things have gone by where I have truly been able to wake up and enjoy my life and be in my own body and know that I'm enough.
Wow. That's, you know what? And I think, I want people that are listening to this to know that, we have like, off camera, you and I have a lot of fun just talking
Yes.
and, about the craziness of this whole journey, right?
Yes.
Like the journey is a trip, really. Like, I think that's the whole thing of it. Like when you look at it, it's just like, wow, I've been on this journey for this long period of time and I've hit this milestone, but the journey's not over.
Not at all.
You talked about codependency, and that's such a huge part of the work that you do as a coach and a lot of the things that you share on the Recovered Life community. I want to talk with you about this because we've both had this situation in long-term sobriety where there were certain things that had to do with codependency and family members and stuff that just were not healed the
No.
way that we maybe would have liked them to have been, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's a bit of a mystery. I know it's a bit of a mystery to me. I talk with you all the time, like going, why, after all the work that I've done, is this particular issue or this situation not healed? And
Yes.
I think a lot of times, including me, I say, well, why is that? Why is that? It's a wrong question, really. It's more about how I'm dealing with it, obviously.
Right. And what I've learned, so I started my codependency recovery very quickly into my sobriety journey. And I discovered really early that I actually treated my codependency with alcohol. That was how I lived within relationships. They were so scary. And many of us who are in recovery are raised in homes where we did not get our needs met. And it's not that we live in the past, but we must go back and figure out the belief systems that are driving our decisions and that are driving our behavior and start to challenge them. That's really where true healing comes from. And I think the reason why it's mysterious is because often we don't even question the belief. Somebody would say something to me like, I'm doing it for attention. I just wanted attention. And I would stop and say, well, what would be wrong for you to want attention when you're 7 years old? Don't most 7-year-olds want attention? And to really question that belief, because we continue with the messages that we learn. We continue parenting and treating ourselves in the same manner because we've never questioned whether it could have been better or should have been better.
Yes, exactly. And I think that one of the things is that long-term sobriety does give you is perspective,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is perspective to see, oh, things went down this way and I see it now, about like, though, this is what I wanted then. This is what ended up happening. This was the work that I've done. And you start to kind of piece together. It's like, oh, thank God I really didn't get it my way. My way would have been horrible.
Right.
I had somebody in early sobriety, Kristina, tell me, thank God that things aren't fair. Because if
Oh,
things were
yes.
fair, you'd really be screwed, right? Like,
Right.
and that always stuck with me. It's just like, well, what I think, and then what's really going on, and then how it ends up all going how it ends up all playing out are
Mhm.
way different things sometimes, and trying to piece that puzzle together is really
Yes.
where the art of it all comes in.
Well, and what you're talking about is spiritual maturity, which comes from experience. I definitely got the message that if bad things happened to me, it was because I was doing something wrong. It never occurred to me that there are moments in everyone's life where something that is negative shows up and you have to deal with it. I really didn't have that understanding. Plus, I think that one of my favorite concepts out of 12 steps is the concept of being right sized and understanding that I am one of 7 billion people. And there are things that are happening in my life that are not personal. There have been moments where I have caused harm in somebody else's life accidentally, not on purpose, not because I was ill-willed toward them. And so that happens to me. I am a human living a very human experience. And being right sized refers to understanding that we don't always know, right? We don't know what's really great for us. In fact, when I got to recovery, I had no clue that what I wanted was actually kind of bad for me. Because I had such a limited perspective of what joy was and what peace was. And to start figuring out that we can be participants, but we don't have to be in charge,
Yes.
except of our own behavior, is freedom.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were talking about the other day on a phone call. We were talking about how, looking back, I was sharing something that was going on, with a relative that I have,
Yes.
and about the whole codependency thing, and about, having that kind of pop up later. For you, it popped up way earlier, the awareness that,
Hmm.
that there was something kind of wrong with this, right? But it's interesting that these things kind of unfold in recovery. Just when you think you're done and you've worked on everything, something pops up, right?
Of
Um,
course.
for you, been the big thing? Let's just say, like in the last 5 years,
Oh,
in your recovery, that's popped up that kind of shocked you, that you were
un-
like, "Oh my gosh, I think I got to work on this."
undoubtedly, it's this ability to enjoy my day without a big dopamine rush. It was this thought process and belief that I had that I was just supposed to know how to relax. Like, right? Everyone knows how to enjoy the spoils of their efforts. Not true. I was dopamine driven, right? Planning, planning, planning. I was, applying perfectionism to situations, wanting to belong, but doing the things that actually pushed people away. I had to understand that my son's journey was his journey, not me. It wasn't me and what I could do for him that actually marked about what kind of great life he's going to have. And I have, in the last couple of years, really determined. I mean, this is going to make you laugh, but you remember that television show, Desperate Housewives?
Yes,
All
yes.
right. I know this is going to be crazy. I'm getting a moral story from Desperate Housewives, but there's a character who is spoiled and having an affair with a young gardener. And she's talking to him about her husband. And he says, what's wrong? And she's like, no, he gave me everything I ever wanted. And he's like, well, what's wrong with that? And she's like, I wanted all the wrong things. And so I wanted a life that was direct proportion to the amount of effort that I was willing to put forward, right?
Yes.
Instead, now I want a life that my God, higher power, has in store for me because I have such a limit on what I think is going to happen. I have such a limit on what I believe I deserve. And so just being able and willing to receive has been one of the biggest lessons in the last 5 years.
You know what? That's such a huge lesson, I think, for everyone, no matter where you're at in your recovery, is this ability to be able to receive, right? To
Mm-hmm.
be able to also listen and really
Mm-hmm.
truly hear what people are saying to you, right? I know that people ask us. We were saying that we need to do a show that is just the common questions that Damon and Christina get all the time on the
Okay.
discussions and
Yes.
like the back channel, because a lot of times people don't want to come on the Recovered Life discussion, or they don't want to put a comment, but they'll send us a message privately,
Yes.
right? And like some of the questions, one of those questions always is that, like, why can't I get sober? right? Like
Mm,
a lot of people ask, like, what's the big problem with why I can't get sober? And obviously, every different story is different, right? But if
right.
you were to say with the people that you're working with now, what you typically tell people when they ask that question, I kind of know what I
Yes.
tell people when I ask that question. But what do you tell people when you ask that question? If they're like, "Hey, I'm struggling. I don't really think that I could get sober, or I've tried to get sober a bunch of times and I just can't quite get it. It never sticks. What's wrong with me?"
For me, it's the lack of surrender for people, the willingness to give up and be out of ideas. You know, my ideas are not working. I don't know what will work, but I'm willing to quit pushing my ideas forward and try something new.
Yes. Yes, that's so great. And this ability to just I always say a lot of it is we see this, Christina, when we're working with people, is awareness too, is
Mhm,
that so many people, I think, and this is me when I say so many people are unaware
mhm.
of really what's going on with them, right? They have no awareness that they are acting a certain way, or they have no awareness that they quit on things, right? They
Right.
might see it a little bit, but it's a little too painful for them, and they don't really want to take a really hard good look at it, because that means that they're going to be something that they don't want to be, right? They'll interpret that as, it's like, well, I don't want to be that person, but
Right.
yet they are that person, right? And so
Yes.
this awareness, this unfolding awareness is, I always think, is one of the huge things. I mean, look, you could be willing to be sober. You could be willing to not have the wreckage anymore. But if you don't have any awareness to what you're doing or the
Mhm.
actions that you're taking, I think it's hard, wouldn't you say, to really kind of
Totally.
grasp any kind of long-term anything.
Absolutely. Self-awareness. That's the one thing I would wish for this world to have, is more self-awareness with the people that I come across, and us as a community. I mean, truly having more self-awareness. I had to concede that I was out of any ideas, that I absolutely did not have the ability to fix this problem on my own. I wasn't going to be able to drink like a lady. I wasn't going, it didn't matter what that word meant to me. At the point that I finally surrendered, it did not matter what other people were thinking, because I truly couldn't move forward and live if I kept doing that, if I kept holding on to my ideas. So I think that you're right. We have to be aware that we're out of ideas. I mean, we're
Yeah.
out of them.
Well, I find this when we're talking about ideas too. I want to jump back to the codependency thing, because I think this is what a lot of people are confused about. And I will tell you, I've been really confused about this too when I first
Mhm.
started talking with you about how prevalent codependency is in recovery, right?
Yes,
Like you said, you never met a recovered alcoholic that didn't have
codependent.
issues with codependency.
Yes,
I think a lot of the confusion is, I'd love for you to just talk about your own journey with this, is that sobriety is very black and white. You drank, you didn't drink, right?
right,
Now, you might not be working on emotional sobriety, but you do have that bar of like, hey, I drank, I didn't drink.
right.
Codependency, I think, is a little bit more tricky, right? Because it's much more of a behavior. It's in your behaviors of who you are. Do you have to have, when you're talking about abstinence from codependency, it really isn't that, right?
No.
It is much more of behavior modification about how you actually treat and interact with other people.
Yes, and ultimately, it's your relationship with yourself that has to be healed. I do believe the term abstinence should be applied to alcohol. That is where it belongs. But sobriety in our behaviors is a lot more difficult to define. If we continue to look toward something outside of ourselves for validation, and that's what ends up happening, we put our needs and wants behind what we perceive somebody else needs and wants. I call it the invisible contract. I will turn myself into a pretzel and be everything that I think you want. But in turn, you must do that for me. And people don't like that. They don't like being manipulated. And I mean, think we are sweet people, codependents. I think that there's a lot of information going on about the fact that codependent behavior like fawning, which is what people would think of more traditionally, is really a trauma response. It's a way to try to control our environment. But codependency comes out in all kinds of ways. You can be a leader and be incredibly codependent with your employees, that they have to act a certain way for you to be okay. And that's really what it ends up being.
I love that. I love that interpretation that you give, because that's very, very, very clear. And you could see if you're in the middle of that being manipulated by somebody who's codependent, or you are that person who's manipulating, right?
Yes.
Making people act and do a certain way for them to be able to have a relationship with you. I love how you say that. So Kristina, over the last 25 years, when you first came in and you started this recovery journey to now, what do you think has been the biggest change in the practice of helping get people sober, or information for sober people that maybe you believed when you first came in, or was practiced when you first came into the journey, and now? What do you think has changed?
Okay, recently, I would say in the last 10 years, the awareness of the public has started to shift. And we no longer are working toward this understanding that addiction is not a moral issue. If you were in recovery 25 years ago at the same time I was, you probably were in a 12-step group. And they clearly explain that this is not about willpower, nor is it a moral issue. We are not bad people. Our brains become addicted to a substance because they're efficient. And for whatever reason, nurture versus nature, we're more prone to it. But it doesn't make us bad people. I also think that the other thing that we're coming to is it's not a them problem. It's an us problem.
Yeah,
It's an
I
us
think that
problem.
the whole idea that the family, and I know as an interventionist, you do this kind of work, and we were just talking about this right before the show about how integrating an entire family, because rarely do I see alcoholics that pop up that I've ever worked with, right, that don't have some sort of dysfunction in their family.
Oh,
There are some that come from what are seemingly perfect families, right, that just so happen to get addicted and have that alcohol gene and everything, right, and it takes off. But rarely do I see that. There's usually something going on. And it's interesting now, we always talk about how they're saying now that this whole trauma response situation is really, trying to get out of the pain, right? It's like
yes.
trying to find a way out. And I know you explain that a lot better than I do, but it's trying to find this past patterns that were installed in you, trying to find a way out to avoid
Yes.
this pain that you're going to go through inevitably when you deal with the world.
Well, I mean, when we use substances to disassociate from ourselves, we're checking out completely. And that speaks to that whatever we're living in that moment, whether it's our pain from past trauma or current situations, is impossible to stay in your body with and live through it. It's this belief that we can't get through it. And so that's why we check out. When that gets removed from you, that avenue, you have to be able to have resources and places to go to start dealing with life on life terms. It's an inside out and an outside in job. And that's why the family system has to be involved. Because as you said already, I personally have never met somebody that had a perfect childhood. I've never met anybody who's actually had that and shown up in addiction. And so taking the shame out of these kinds of discussions has got to be the first step. Like, what is going on with the child? What is happening? Now, I was a late bloomer. I didn't start drinking alcoholically till I was 21. But I mean, I should say I didn't start drinking until I was 21. Very few occurrences. But I remember when I had it. And on the outside, even at 27, when I finally did surrender and decide I was going to try to live a sober life, no one would have been able to point to one thing and say, oh, she's one of them people. But I guess that's the lesson, is that it will happen to all of us. It does happen to all of us. And we have to address it as a community. Not just even the family unit, as a community.
So, so many people, Christina, want a big drastic change, right? They want to go from point A to point
Mhm.
Z. And I know this is why a lot of times you and I are hired as coaches, right? Is because people feel stuck. And I have a whole recovered life discussion around that of just people
Yes,
feel stuck and they want to go from A to Z and they want to go very quickly, right?
right.
And sometimes that happens in sobriety
Mhm.
and sometimes that does not. If you're going to look back on the last 25 years that you've had, and you were going to pick a decision that you made that you were forced to make, right? Or you felt
Mhm.
you had to make, or a decision you wanted to make that really rocketed you to the next level. What was that? What was that decision and choice you made?
Moving to California, my first year. That was a decision that higher power presented in front of me, and moving to California and being out of any resources outside of recovery forced me to get connected. It forced me to, I was far away from my family. I was far away from the drama or the past hurts. And guess what? I was still a mess. Like I brought it with me. And so I moved the first year of my recovery. And the fact that I was in a new town and needed to stay sober and wanted to stay sober got me good and ready to start connecting with people. So the decision that, first decisions I never picked up. Second decision is I connected and I dug in and I made a choice to continue pursuing recovery and continue to learn how to be uncomfortable or comfortable with uncomfort.
What's shocking is when you say that, Christina, is that, it's funny alcoholism because when we have empirical data and we see our lives and we said when we connect and reach out,
Hmm.
especially to other alcoholics, right? When we
Yes,
reach out and we do this, we know that our life is so much better. We know
so
we can get
much.
out of whatever we're in if we do these very basic, simple things. But alcoholism and our mind will tell us, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Right. Like, it's funny because I remember I was one of those people who had the committee that was
Hmm.
sitting and talking to them on the shoulder like a cartoon, right? The
Right.
devil and the God, like sitting and blah, 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 always having a
Uh-huh.
conversation. But it is truly like that sometimes. It's like, it's so strange that like after all of time, and the exact same thing happened to me a couple of weeks back where I was like, I'm feeling kind of lonely. I feel like I've been working too much. I haven't really been connecting with people.
Hmm.
And it was like the first thing that came to me was like, oh, you should connect with people. The second thing that came to me is that's such BS. Why are you going to do that? That's such a waste of time. That's not going to work. Do it on your own. Do it.
Right.
And that's the what comes at me. It's like, why can't you just do it by yourself? Why are
Yes.
you so weak that you
Yeah.
can't do it by yourself? It's so funny how these voices come back. And it's those are things, some of them I will say, some of the committee has retired in
Yes.
long-term sobriety, but I still have some founding members that
Sure.
are there talking to me to this day.
Contrary action. That was what I was taught. Contrary action. Pray and do the dishes. These very simple concepts that when my old belief systems, my critical parent, the thoughts that I had about this is only happening to me, happiness doesn't show up, good things don't happen, you better just get used to it. I would have
Yeah.
these other habits and other voices that could take over and say, that's sweet. I know you're trying to protect her, but you're not helping her. So let's move her into another place. Let's connect. It is a struggle, and I think denying that it's a struggle is a disservice. We all feel that struggle where we need to connect, but we self-protect instead, and that doesn't help.
Christina Dennis, this has been a really great episode, number 107, Friday, May 6th, 2022. We'd like to wish
Thank
you
you.
a very happy 25-year anniversary. It's a huge deal. It's a
Mm,
huge accomplishment. And we love you and we're very, very proud of you. And I know,
thank
guys,
you.
if you want to reach out to Christina Dennis, say hi, give her congratulations as well. It's really easy. You can connect with her on Recovered Life. You can become a member for free, and it takes less than a
Mm,
minute. And it's such great content is there. I'd also like to give a shout out. People are wondering, how can I be part of these Recovered Life discussions? that you and Kristina are hosting on
Mhm.
Clubhouse. And these are replayed now on the podcast and on our network. It's really easy, guys. All you have to do is go to recoveredlife.us. That's recoveredlife.us. Become a member. And we've got a full calendar there of everything that you can participate in. So please join us at recoveredlife.us. Kristina, Dennis, any final thoughts on episode 107?
Yeah, don't pick up. Don't pick up. Your life is so worth fighting for, and you don't have to do it alone. There will be people who will help you along the way. So that's what I want to say. Stay in recovery so you can continue to live.
Thank you so much. And with that, episode 107, Friday, May 6, 2022.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Keep the conversation going. Join Recovered Life, a community of like-minded people who are looking to live their best recovered lives. Membership is free, and you can apply at recoveredlife.us.